Alright guys, welcome back. So on deck today, we're going to pit the Glock Marksman barrel against the standard polygonal rifled barrel of the previous generation of Glocks. So we have their Glock 19X and we have a Glock 19 Gen 4 MOS. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a velocity test. So we're going to use 147 grain Std Lawman, and we're also going to use 115 grain Std Lawman. We're going to fire some rounds over the crony and see if there's any difference in the velocity due to the difference in the riflings in these barrels. As you know in my previous videos, the polygonal rifling tends to give higher velocity. At least that's what I've shown in my testing, and Glock also claims that on their website. The Marksman barrel uses a new hexagonal rifling. It is a take on the polygonal rifling. It's supposedly an improvement as far as accuracy, but I haven't seen anything stated as far as velocity. It is not a traditional rifling as our aftermarket barrels generally are. Just something to note. It is different, but Glock does claim increased accuracy. So when we get done with our velocity test, we're going to hit up an accuracy test. We're going to shoot from 25 yards off a sandbag rest. We're using the Std Lawman 147 grain, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the Marksman barrel in our Glock 19X, and then we're going to take the standard Gen 4 barrel and also put it in the Glock 19X, and then we're going to swap it all around. We'll put the Marksman barrel in our Gen 4 MOS RMR Glock here, and then we'll use the standard barrel. So we'll try to eliminate the differences in the sighting systems, and hopefully we'll get some results that actually show us whether or not there's any increase in accuracy or not. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this going. All right, first up will be the Spear 147 grain Lawman from the standard Gen 4 Glock 19 barrel. All right, let's go take a look. All right, for our low we had 1028, for our high we had 1068, and our average was 1048. All right, let's try the Marksman barrel. All right, this will be the G19X with the Marksman barrel, same 147 grain Std Lawman. All right, let's go check it out. All right, our low was 968, our high was 1013, our average was 985. So far it looks like the traditional standard Glock polygonal rifling is yielding higher velocity. We'll go ahead and try the 115 grain Lawman and see if we get similar results. All right, this will be the 115 grain Lawman through the standard Gen 4 Glock 19 barrel. All right, let's go check it out. Our low was 1150. Our high was 1172, and our average was 1163. All right, let's give the Marksman barrel a try. All right, this will be the 115 grain Std Lawman from the G19X with the Marksman barrel. All right, let's go check it out. All right, our low is 1143, our high is 1183, and our average was 1159. I think if I remember right on the other one was 1160 something, so not enough difference in that case with that particular ammunition to make a difference. But we did see a difference with the 147, so I don't know. I'd say that's kind of inconclusive. Too small of a data set to really know, but I don't know. All right, first up will be the G19X with the Marksman barrel. What I'll do is I'll put the Gen 4 barrel in the 19X and fire it as well, and then I'll put the Marksman barrel in our Gen 4 with the RMR and fire 10 rounds with it, and then swap back to the standard barrel in the RMR Gen 4 and fire 10 rounds through that. So that way the sighting systems and whatnot won't skew the results. But I'm not too confident that I'm going to really see any real results. I'm pretty sure shooter error is going to play a bigger part than the barrel ever would, but you never know. So we're going to go ahead and give this a try. All right, let's go check it out. All right, so overall, that's not too bad a performance. This was me. I can tell you that now. The rest felt pretty good. I did have one that didn't feel quite so good. Fatigue kind of does start to come into play when you're doing 10 rounds. I didn't really factor that in, but nonetheless, that's pretty solid results if you factor in the shooter error on this part. That's pretty darn good, especially with just the standard old Glock night sight. So let's go ahead and swap out to the Gen 4 barrel and see if we see any difference. All right, we got our Gen 4 barrel installed, and we're going to give this a whirl. All right, let's go check it out. All right, well, yeah, I don't know if shooter fatigue might be something that be coming into play here, but there's no doubt that the Marksman barrel gave better performance, at least on this go around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the RMR Glock, so I have a better sighting system, and see if that doesn't have a more significant effect. But so far, it looks like the Marksman barrel definitely is yielding higher accuracy. All right, we're going to give the RMR a whirl here. Get my dot. This is the Marksman barrel. All right, let's go check it out. All right, so overall, we're still holding a tighter group than we did with our standard barrel, but this is different lockup in a different gun. So let's go ahead and try our standard barrel and see how that compares. All right, got our standard barrel installed. So let's see how this shakes out. All right, let's go take a look. All right, so that's pretty clear. Not my best shooting, but hey, I didn't really factor in the fact that this is going to be 40 rounds, and there's definitely some shooter fatigue. I probably should have done 5-round groups and then another set of 5-round groups to try to reduce some of that fatigue, because some of this is my fault. But overall, there is a noticeable difference. And the Marksman barrel, if you exclude the occasional on my fault, even if you look at our standard barrel and you exclude an occasional oopsie, the Marksman barrel is definitely printing tighter. So I'll crunch the numbers on the velocity. I'll have those written on here when we do the final thoughts on this, but it does look like the Marksman barrel does yield higher velocity or higher accuracy, at least in this instance with this ammunition. Now, would you be able to tell this difference shooting handheld? I don't know. Personally, when I shoot handheld, I don't really notice as much difference, or if any, just because shooter error just comes into play. But I am seeing tighter groups overall with the Marksman barrel, at least in this instance. All right, so some final thoughts on this. Well, if we look at our velocity figures, and for whatever reason I got this backwards when I wrote it on here, but our standard barrel gave us an average of 1048 with the Spear 147 Grain Lawman, whereas our Marksman barrel gave us an average of 985. And if you look across the board, the lowest from the standard barrel was still higher by a noticeable amount than the highest on the standard barrel, or I'm sorry, the Marksman barrel. So plus 63 was our average feet per second gain when we're talking about velocity between the Marksman and the standard barrel, in the favor of the standard barrel. With the 115 grain projectiles, it didn't come out so clear. We only had a net gain of 4 feet per second. However, there was one round in the Marksman barrel that gave a little bit out of the norm on high velocity at 1183. The rest fell generally within 1150s and 1140s compared to our standard barrel, which usually fell in the 1160s. So not much difference, or as much difference on the 115. In fact, I would say that's negligible. There was a noticeable difference on the 147. So whether or not that's the longer bearing surface on the projectile and friction being caused in that barrel compared to the 115, I'm not sure, but that's just how it shook out. So is that significant enough to matter? Maybe, maybe not. It really depends on what you're doing. For most people, no. But in the case of this 147 grain, that may make a difference, whether it be shooting suppressed, where you're trying to stay under that sound barrier, or potentially power factor for competition, or expansion, although if you have a properly designed bullet like an HST or whatnot, this really probably wouldn't make all that much difference. But the main thing we want to talk about is the accuracy. So I am not the greatest target shooter, particularly off arrest. I don't shoot that much off arrest, and so I'm not proclaiming this to be definitive. That said, there was noticeably tighter groups, regardless of the gun, with the Marksman barrel. If we exclude the one-off flyer here and there from fatigue, we're looking at about 3 inches. So 9 rounds into 3 inches here with the Glock 19X. And basically the same thing here, although a little less concentric, but nonetheless basically about the same. The standard barrel, we're looking at around 4, maybe 5 inches, depending on how far out our flyer went. And some of that is me, so I'm going to say 4 inches is probably a little more respectable, given the fatigue of shooting 10-shot groups. I didn't really think about that when I did it. I should have done 5-shot groups and taken a break, 5-shot, so on and so forth. But that being said, there was, regardless of the fatigue factor, a noticeably tighter grouping with the Marksman barrel. And ultimately, I think that's all that really matters here. This is not a definitive test. I don't have a machine rest. I don't even have a proper pistol rest where the butt of the gun and everything's being supported. But that said, the Marksman barrel, regardless of the gun, was able to produce tighter groups. Is this enough to matter? Honestly, shooting handheld, I don't really notice that much difference. That's just because shooter error and whatnot comes into play more so than the shot groupings, especially when you talk about 25 yards or more. It just takes almost next to nothing shooting handheld to throw a round way out. So that said, I would say yes, the Marksman barrel does offer potential for higher accuracy, but ultimately the shooter is probably going to be the weakest link in that category. So Glock claims this is a hexagonal rifling in the Marksman barrel, so it is not a traditional lands and grooves type rifling that you would find in, say, aftermarket barrels and whatnot. So keep that in mind. And looking through it, I can say it is different. So keep that in mind. They say no. They recommend against the use of lead bullets in it. So for those who you think I'll get a Gen 5 or this type of barrel so that I can use lead bullets, they still recommend against that. So I'm not going to tell you one way or the other on that. All I'm going to say is do your research and be cautious. It is not a traditional lands and groove type rifling from an aftermarket barrel, which has been stated, or I've seen stated in press multiple times that it is. It is not. And if you look down it, you will see this. It is. They call it hexagonal. It's a supposed improvement upon the polygonal rifling. I'm not sure. There's a couple rumors out about where it actually came from. Some claim it was to leave a more defined rifling markings on the projectiles for forensics identification, and that I'm not sure. Maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe it was kind of difficult for them to tell which officer had fired which round or so on and so forth, and this was maybe something that was requested by perhaps the FBI, or it could be because if you look at this, if you put these in a machine rest, you probably would yield tighter accuracy with this Marksman barrel, and as a result, if it came down to accuracy being the deciding factor on selecting a duty gun, all else being equal, the Marksman barrel would give you a leg up for the Glock platform. So overall, I still like the extra velocity I tend to get from the standard polygonal rifling for defensive purposes and whatnot, just because the ranges encountered are not that far, and I'd rather have that more margin of error for expansion. But that being said, if accuracy is a prime one of your prime reasons for switching, say, platforms or whatnot, then the Marksman barrel does definitely it definitely seems to bring something to the table. Whether or not you'll see it shooting handheld, I'm just not sure. That's just way too shooter dependent. I will say that none other than Larry Vickers, when he tested the Gen 5 Glock, said it was the most accurate Glock he had fired to date. A lot of people question that, saying that that was just more of a placebo effect or so on and so forth, that you just see what you want to see just because. That said, he's far more qualified to give an accuracy report than I am, because I know he's a better shooter than I am. So I'll have to take his word on it, and in this test we did seem to see that pan out. So all right, guys, that's it for now. So if you want to see more stuff like this, let me know. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I know I got some requests to test the standard barrel against the Glock 19X's Marksman barrel. So hopefully this gave you something to go off of and gives you a little more data points if you're out there looking at other reviews and stuff. So if you like this kind of content and you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe, share the video. It helps the channel out. As always, I appreciate your comments, guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I'm off the mark. But as always, please keep those comments professional, and I'll see you guys next time.